Chapter 1856 Three Kingdoms. Zhang Yi promised that as long as he could pass this trial by ordeal, he would share part of what he had gained with Brian. And he also promised to give other resources, which made the indecisive Brian decide to join Zhang Yi's team. Brian may seem like a goofball, but he's actually not stupid at all. Zhang Yi's team had a stable 4-person group, which meant that the 4 of them would not be fighting each other and would not slow down the team's progress. Compared to joining other uncertain teams, becoming Zhang Yi's rival was actually a good choice. Thus, Zhang Yi's team had already completed its 5-person configuration. He had not tried to find a 6th person, as the more people there were, the greater the possibility of their ultimate victory. However, there was currently no suitable candidate. One after the other, the remaining people began to take action. After all, time was limited, and they had to select suitable teammates as soon as possible. King Arthur took the initiative to find Odin. He was a middle-aged, white, thin man with a small mustache. His cheeks were deeply sunken in, giving him the appearance of malnutrition, and one even wondered if he was taking prohibited drugs. However, Odin had a pair of eagle-like sharp eyes, and those who looked into them could not help but be immersed in them. Odin, god of war from Asgard, and Adolf Müller, the mutant from Prussia. Odin, let's join forces. The situation is dire, and despite our past rivalry, we are both Europeans, so it is in our mutual interest to cooperate. Odin looked down at the right hand that King Arthur had extended to him. He raised his head, hesitated for a moment, and then shook it firmly. Very well, I feel the same way. I hope we can work together happily. Happy to cooperate. The 2 men smiled at each other, but the smiles on their faces carried an inexplicable depth. There was no need for many words. At the moment, their cooperation was truly a matter of necessity. Others also began to find their partners one after the other, even though some of them were not at all willing to communicate with others. For example, there was Pokong, a mutant from the Wulwan Empire beneath the Misty Valley on Star Island, who was covered in black armor and had a long lizard tail. For example, there was the slender and fit young man in a black, form-fitting combat suit with long, black hair that concealed his face, who looked like he might be from the dragon clan of the Qinling Mountains Changwon. There was also the unknown mutant who was shrouded in a huge black cloak, with only his eyes glowing with a sinister light. And there was the mutant wearing a strange combat suit and an aquarium-like helmet on his head. There were so many strange people, and Zhang Yi watched them as they were forced to find teams. Half an hour quickly passed, and the team formations were set. The final team formations were as follows: Team 1, Huashu Kingdom Chaos, Zhang Yi, 9 Heavens Mysterious Goddess, Liang Yu, Untitled Yang Xinxin, Luban, Lu Karen, and Columbia Supernova, Brian Griffin. Team 2, Britannia, King Arthur, leader of the Knights of the Round Table. Europa Alliance, Odin, King of Asgard, Holy Roman Church, the Death Knight, one of the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, Cardinal, codename Archangel Michael, Olive, the King of Mechanical Civilization, the Lord of the Age of Tsang, Ichigard, the mysterious black-robed man, and the black-armored lizard man, breaking through the sky. Team 3, Chan Wuan, a mysterious young man with long hair, the Pantheon of the Fremons, Morana, the Winter Goddess, and Alexei Ivanov, Purin, the Thunder God, the mysterious person in the strange combat suit, Sacrifice, the Emperor of the Khitan Empire and the Grand Master of the Assassins, Saladin. The 3 teams were thus finalized. Seeing the other 2 teams' configurations, the white dog felt a little guilty. He leaned over to Zhang Yi and whispered, "Why do I feel that we don't have much of a chance? These guys are going to be tough, aren't they?" Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said, "I know that without you having to tell me. But don't forget, these guys are famous because they are all bishop-level mutants who have dominated their fields." He pointed his finger at the ground and said, "But here, in this world, they may not be as powerful as my friends by my side." Zhang Yi looked at Yang Xinxin, Liang Yu, and Lu Karen and proudly smiled. "In the same field of supernatural abilities, my people will not lose to anyone." The white dog patted his forehead with one hand. Okay, when the time comes and we really fight, the worst that will happen is that I will block their IDs in my heart." Since I'm on your boat, I'll just have to continue following you. After the team was assigned and the manager confirmed their decision for the last time, they activated the portal. Everyone turned into streams of light and was transported to the battlefield. The 4 knights and the manager could see everything that was happening in the entire battlefield. The Knight of Cross folded his arms and looked at Ling not far away and asked, "Knight of the Sword, who do you think will be the last one standing among these guys?" Ling looked at the battlefield without any hesitation and pointed her finger at Zhang Yi's face. The other knights all looked at Zhang Yi. "Him? Are you sure? He looks unremarkable, nothing stands out about him." The battle was also incredibly boring, cautious as a groundhog hiding underground. A smile suddenly appeared on Ling's face. "He's interesting, isn't he?" "Interesting?" This word left the other knights speechless, because what they needed was a strong person who could change the world. How could someone who was interesting become the person they wanted? Don't judge everything based on our past experiences. After all, if it had proven successful, we wouldn't be here today. Ling said indifferently, "This time, I want to try doing something different. Maybe that's the way to break the pattern." "Oh, I see." When the other knights heard this, some of them looked thoughtful. However, the Knight of Cross pointed to the city where Ichigard and the others were located, unimpressed. Whimsical ideas will not make things go in a smooth direction. Strength is the most important factor in determining everything. Therefore, I feel that in the end, the people who will be able to come out on top are them. Ichigard's team was indeed the strongest of the 3 teams on paper. The reason was none other than their individual strength, not to mention the fact that they had a 6th person. When the strength of all members is brought to the same level, having an extra person means a huge advantage. Ling didn't say anything else, but instead, she carefully watched what was happening in the middle of the battlefield. After a gust of wind and sand, Zhang Yi, the 4 people and the dog appeared in a city. They had previously gained a general understanding of this world through the 3D projection. The 3 cities were 500 kilometers apart from each other. For normal people, even if they were mutants, it would take a long time to travel this distance. Except for Zhang Yi. As a space ability user, it only takes him a little over a minute to travel to the next city. The 4 of them and the dog stand in the very center of the city, in a high place that overlooks the entire city. Behind them stands the tall statue. A statue that looks very much like a human being, but with subtle differences. Everyone turned their attention to Zhang Yi, who leisurely took out a few sofas from dimensional space for everyone to sit down. He also took out some refreshments and chatted with everyone while eating. Finally, Zhang Yi's gaze fell on Yang Xinxin. "Xinxin, you can directly arrange what we need to do next." Yang Xinxin first took a piece of chocolate glutinous rice cake from the tea table and said while eating, "The situation we are in right now is similar to the 3 kingdoms. Because there are 3 forces, we cannot simply defeat one side. There are 2 things we need to do. First, we need to protect our own city and prevent the statues from being destroyed. Second, we need to find a way to destroy the statues of the other 2 teams." From an analysis of the situation, on the surface, King Arthur and his team are the strongest, and they should be the Wei Kingdom of the 3 kingdoms. Mirana's team may have 1 more person than us, but we have the advantage of unity and mutual understanding, while they are plagued by internal conflicts. So Mirana's team is the weakest, and they are the Shu Kingdom. Lu Karen frowned in dissatisfaction, "So aren't we just a bunch of cowards?" Yang Xinxin gave a faint smile, "That's just an analogy. In fact, I think our strength is very strong. But from the perspective of the other 2 parties, judged purely by the strength of the mutants, our team is the weakest. Because there are only 2 real bishop-level mutants. Even if everyone's supernatural abilities are pulled to the same level here, instinctively, everyone will still think that the combat effectiveness of the 3 of us, me, Teacher Liang, and Karen, will be discounted. There's another crucial point." Yang Xinxin's mouth curled up into a teasing smile, "The 3 of us are women, and we look young and immature. On the battlefield, women are always subconsciously considered to be weak. Especially since most people don't know Yang Xinxin and the other two, they can hardly be considered famous, compared to a top-level mutant like Morana. Brian spoke up at this point. Hey, although I don't quite understand what you're talking about, but can I assume that we are quite weak? Yang Xinxin said indifferently, at least on the surface, yes. We will give people a very weak feeling, which is a good thing. Good thing? Brian frowned. If you give people a weak feeling, you should be the first to be attacked, right? Yang Xinxin shook her head. No, quite the opposite. Being considered the weakest and most threatening of the three parties will instead become our greatest advantage. She placed 3 cups on the coffee table. When there are 3 forces, and only one can win, the best thing to do is for the weaker 2 forces to join forces and get rid of the strongest one first. Therefore, King Arthur's team is the most dangerous. Zhang Yi nodded knowingly. That's right, because no one dares to cooperate with them. That's why the kingdoms of Wu and Shu join forces to fight the kingdom of Wei together. Zhang Yi looked up at Yang Xinxin. Xinxin, are you saying that we should join forces with Morana and the others to get rid of King Arthur and his team first? Yang Xinxin nodded. That's right, that's the best option. But that's not enough. She placed the cup representing King Arthur's team next to her own team's cup. King Arthur and the others will soon understand this as well. Therefore, the team that poses the greatest threat to them is actually the team Morana is on. The King Arthur team can hardly fight 2 enemies at once. And if they are eliminated by Morana and us joining forces, the Morana team will become our opponent again. On the surface, we are at a disadvantage in the competition with the Morana team. She paused, finished the chocolate mochi in her hand, and then said leisurely, therefore, the wisest thing for King Arthur to do is to promise us benefits and then ask us to stab the Morana team in the back. Brian pondered Yang Xinxin's words, his brows furrowed. But no matter how you think about it, in both cases, it's hard for us to be the ultimate winners. Yang Xinxin smiled, her smile full of confidence. But what if, from the beginning, they got the situation between our 3 parties wrong? Yang Xinxin stood up and stacked the 3 cups on top of each other, symbolizing their team's cup on top. If it really is the 3 kingdoms, then we are the Wei Kingdom. Zhang Yi also stood up, staring at the huge sculpture standing next to him. I'll try something first. Since the criterion for our elimination is that all of us are killed in battle or the sculpture is destroyed, can I incorporate the sculpture into my dimensional space? In that case, we can avoid being stolen. Liang Yu stood up and said, I'll give it a try. She walked up to the huge sculpture, wrapped her arms around the base, and then gave a mighty heave. The administrator's rules were very clear, the sculpture had to be destroyed in order to be eliminated. Since pulling it out would not be a violation, Liang Yu exerted her terrifying strength. With her arms wrapped tightly around the base, the earth beneath her feet trembled violently. Zhang Yi and the others felt a little unsteady on their feet, and even the entire city seemed to be shaking due to Liang Yu's strength. But after all that fuss, the sculpture didn't budge. Liang Yu helplessly let go of her hands and said to Zhang Yi and the others, it seems that this petty scheme is not going to work. No, it might. Zhang Yi, however, keenly perceived something. He pondered for a moment and said, Liang Yu, when you just pulled the sculpture, although it seemed to be connected to the city and couldn't be pulled out at all, the city was shaking. Yang Xinxin and the others' eyes lit up. Brother, you mean, absorb this city into your dimensional space? Zhang Yi nodded with a smile, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. But if the city disappears from view, they'll definitely notice. How do we solve this problem? Brian asked. Zhang Yi glanced at the ground. The entire city was built from huge stones, seamlessly integrated. An idea suddenly came to him. Brian, help me lift up the city. I'll try to raise a sandstorm to block this area and shield them from prying eyes. He looked at Lu Karen and said, Karen, you have 1 day to build a similar city. Can you do it? Well, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, as long as it looks similar under the cover of the sandstorm. This stone city is not complicated. The battlefield setting is supposed to be ancient, and even the soldiers arrayed outside the city are wearing ancient armor. Therefore, the entire city is also made of stone, with most of the areas connected as a whole. Outside, there are vast areas of Gobi Desert and desert, so it is not difficult to source materials locally. Liu Karen should have no problem riding the snow owl to create an identical city. Liu Karen glanced at the small stone city again, nodded with a determined look in her eyes. No problem, leave it to me. Very good. Zhang Yi nodded immediately. He first asked Liu Karen to use the equipment to block the signal in this area to prevent the other party from spying with modern technology. Then, by absorbing a large amount of dust from the vicinity and throwing it into the air, he created a lot of wind and sand to block physical spying. The three cities were 500 kilometers apart. Unless they were brave enough to get close, from a distance of several dozen kilometers, the area would already be filled with yellow sand, and not even the shadow of a stone city could be seen. After doing all this, Zhang Yi and Brian glanced at each other. Brian stood in front of the stone city and activated his ability weightlessness. The not-so-large city immediately rose up with a rumble. Zhang Yi was initially worried that doing so would attract the attention of the administrator, but seeing that the administrator did not react as the entire city floated in midair, Zhang Yi immediately became excited. This method works. Zhang Yi immediately opened the dimensional gate and sent the entire city, along with the statue, into dimensional space. This scene was completely witnessed by the administrator and the four knights. Oh! What a crafty little thing, to have come up with such a method. The knight in the crown of thorns spoke somewhat teasingly, looking at the projection of the administrator and asking, would this be considered exploiting a loophole in the rules? This does not violate the rules, said the administrator indifferently. Being able to skillfully apply the rules is also a kind of ability. People who follow the rules to the letter will find it difficult to accomplish great things. When the rules were formulated, they created huge benefits for those who broke them. The Knight of Thorns nodded, you're right. Zhang Yi and the others were busy laying out the plan while also keeping a close watch on their surroundings. However, Yang Xinxin told them that the people from the other two parties would not come looking for trouble with them for the time being. 7 days is not a long time, but it is still more than enough. The first thing they need to deal with now is their own internal problems. Yang Xinxin leisurely held her cup and drank her black tea as she lightly analyzed the situation. Xinxin, what do you think? Zhang Yi asked. Yang Xinxin said, the biggest problem with a temporary team is that it is hard for everyone to convince each other. And the team needs a leader to preside over matters when differences arise. We are a team ourselves, so there will be no differences of opinion, and we can quickly execute various orders as soon as we enter the battlefield. As for them, it would be good if they didn't fight. Mentioning this, Zhang Yi became a little curious. After pondering for a long time, he asked Yang Xinxin, I want to go and gather some intelligence from them now. Do you think I should go? Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi with a smile and said, you didn't have to tell me, I was planning to do the same thing. Don't worry about us, they won't have the time to sneak up on us. Brother, just go to them without a care. Zhang Yi nodded. As a space ability user, he could go and spy on other cities nearby. Even if he is discovered, no one can prevent him from leaving. Zhang Yi made sure that nothing was left out before opening the dimensional gate and first fleeing towards the city where King Arthur and the others were. After Zhang Yi left, Yang Xinxin put down the cup in her hand and walked up to Liang Yu. Liang Yu held her spear, burning fields, behind her back and looked in all directions with a wary expression. Seeing Yang Xinxin, she hurriedly asked, Xinxin, is there anything you need me to do? Yang Xinxin stared at Liang Yu, Teacher Liang. Do you remember what we said before? There are indeed some things that require you to do them. But don't tell my brother about this. Liang Yu froze for a moment, and then she understood. I understand. We all believe in your abilities, and in order to win the ultimate victory, no matter what you want us to do, I will have no doubts in you. Yang Xinxin nodded, She didn't say much, and at the right time, she would tell Liang Yu and the others what to do. Everyone had lived and died together for 3 years, and they already trusted each other, and could completely entrust themselves to each other. In that case, there was no need to tell everyone the plan in advance, so as not to affect the combat plan due to emotions. The battlefield is cruel, and the thing that must not be moved is emotion. Even at certain times, some necessary sacrifices need to be made. As Yang Xinxin had said, when Zhang Yi arrived near the city where King Arthur and the others were, he immediately sensed a powerful energy fluctuation. Someone is fighting. Zhang Yi crept closer. As a top-level mutant of the Time and Space Department, he was extremely difficult to detect when he tried to sneak into an area. Zhang Yi concealed himself in the void and surveyed the area. Sure enough, as soon as he arrived, he discovered that the two people fighting were Odin and Ichigard. The others either stood by and watched the battle with indifference, or sat in a corner of the city wall, quietly watching the two fight. This team was undoubtedly strong, but no one was willing to be second best. However, everyone had their own ideas, and even the strongest team could fall apart. So, at the slightest disagreement, Odin and Ichigard fought. Even when they were outside, Asgard had seen many mutants die at the hands of the mecha, so the tension was palpable. Zhang Yi hid in the shadows and watched. Odin rode his 8-winged Pegasus, and the silver lightning of his eternal spear Gungnir flashed as he hurled it from his hand, directly targeting Ichigard. His attacks cannot be avoided, only parried or temporarily evaded using special abilities. Ichigard's fighting style is simple and crude. The huge crimson battle sword in his hand bursts with astonishing energy. With a single slash, the terrifying sword pressure and thunder spear annihilate each other in midair. Zhang Yi observes in secret, trying to remember the abilities of the two in his heart. But at that moment, the black-armored mutant sitting in the corner looked up from the Pokong and gazed at the empty space where Zhang Yi was. The commander told me about an extraordinary young man in Tianhai City. He's good at sneaking around and spying in the void. He was right,